Hello, all you hardcore boxing fans out there. How you doing? It's Russ here from Porky's Corner, the voice of hardcore boxing. But then again, you know that, don't you? Because that's why you've tuned in. Today, I'm joined by my good friend Julian from Dewsbury. How are you doing, Julian?
I'm good, Russell. It's the weekend. Feeling good.
How's Gary Sykes doing?
Gary's okay. Obviously, as you know, sometimes the people who help, people with struggles and things, it has to be confidential. But Gary's getting some help right now, and I'm going to catch up with him next week to see how that help is doing. It's not from the border control, so we wouldn't expect that, would we? But Gary's getting some help from some people who actually care about him and who are concerned about his welfare.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
And that's come as a result of Porky's Corner and your good self putting us on here. Whilst the belt's another thing, and I'm sure we'll catch up with that one at some point. We'll put that one on ice. The most important thing is Gary's health and Gary's well-being. And that honestly is a direct result of putting this on your show. Special shout out to a guy called Tim. He doesn't want me to mention his full name, but Tim's been absolutely brilliant. Tim's done a lot of running around, a lot of digging, true boxing fan, true fan of people actually, and he's been amazing. And I'm not saying Gary is ever going to be 100% the right person again, but he's getting help, and it's a result of your show. It's a result of Tim and a few people running around. So brilliant, mate. Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much. We had a winner, didn't we, last Sunday? The Evander Holyfield glove in the glass box thing, whatever it was in, casing or something. He took it to his house, didn't you?
Yeah, we certainly did. Reese dropped it off, called him for 5 minutes, had a chat to Reese and his parents. Absolutely thrilled to bits. Reese's dad, he used to go to St. Pat's, done a little bit of boxing himself, so that's great. You always find people in the area who have done a little bit of boxing, so it was just really good family people. And the lad was buzzing with the glove. You know, I showed him the photo of me with Holyfield, and he realised it was like the real deal, no pun intended. And it was chuffed to bits, mate. It was said absolutely brilliant. It was buzzing, and because it was framed, naturally he's going to have it in his bedroom or something like that. And he loves the show as well. He just thinks the show's fab.
Thank you, Reese. Hope you're well. Another winner, Martin from Cumbria, has got his Puma hard plays on.
Nice.
Do you remember them at school?
I certainly do, mate. I remember even Adidas Lendls, Puma G Velas, and all those.
Adidas Lendl Court. They were 40 quid then when I was at school.
Absolutely. I think my brother had some of those, and just iconic, really. They're all the 80s casual stuff. It's massive, isn't it? My lad wears all that stuff
now, aren't they? All that stuff now, isn't it? It's all back in.
My stuff wears it all, that, Sergio Tacchini tops. I think This Is England, that drama brought a lot of it back. And
Feeler tops are back, aren't they? The feeler tracky tops that you wear with jeans, casual type.
That's right. And what I heard as well, because I'm so out of fashion naturally, being 50-year-old, but someone was telling me last week, I've got one lad called Danny who's one of my team, and he's got this mullet and he's got this tash, and I thought, is it just this for a bet? And apparently mullets are back in and tashes are back in, and I'm like,
tashes, muzzies are back in there.
Can't believe it. The really high level trend people who follow the trends, it's not mainstream yet, it's creeping in, like the beard started coming back and all this kind of stuff. The mullet is back, mate, apparently.
Right.
I might not be able to pull that one off, but yeah, the mullet is back.
You can pull Muzzy off.
Yeah, I can do that one. It'd be great.
Right. Lots gone on in the last 5 days. Step aside. We call Anthony Joshua Big Meech now on here. So Big Meech wanted to step aside. So did Dillian White. Fury pulled plug at last minute. And then we're taunting them on social media. What's going on? What's going on, Julian?
It's a really broad question. The first thing I'll say is, sometimes you got sort of negative feedback, and people will say, "Oh, I'm either sat on the fence or I've changed my mind." What I like to do, Russell, when we have these conversations and talk about all this stuff, is it's like an ongoing saga, isn't it? So you're entitled to change your opinion. You're entitled to think laterally, and I like to do that. I like to think all kinds of different scenarios, as opposed to what we've got right now, if you look on social media and you look on YouTube and you look at all the comments, you're either Fury or you're Joshua. If you're Fury and Warren, you're Fury and Aram. If you're Joshua and Eddie Hearn. And nothing will change your opinion, nothing will change your mind, and you'll always be like a big fan of one and you'll absolutely hate the other. It seems to be a real divide. For me, there'll be times when I'm kind of big on Fury and then I get frustrated with him and then I'll start to warm to Joshua. So I like to, I'm not fickle, I just like to kind of get all the pieces and parts of what's been going on. The one thing what's got lost in all of this for me, and by the way, I'm not a Dillian Whyte fan, nor am I anti-Dillian Whyte. I don't think he's this big noise that everybody talks about.
He is on social media, though, isn't he?
He is on social media, yeah. I'm rarely on it.
That's where we're losing sight of it all now, where Dillian Whyte does numbers. Eddie Hearn, he does numbers. He does numbers, not on pay-per-view buys. He done against Parkers and Rivers, but he does on IFL. He's big on it. People subscribe to him and that. But what does his CV suggest? He's got a vacant British against Ian Lewinson.
The CV's quite empty as far as I'm concerned, but I can't help but feel sorry for Dillian Whyte, because I think where's Dillian Whyte in this picture? Obviously now he's got his shot at the title, but he's only got his shot at the title because the other three camps couldn't agree what was going on. So Dillian Whyte, let's just play back and say, okay, Joshua gets the amount of money he's asked for. Let's not say Joshua, like Eddie's saying, he's fighting Usyk because he's proud and he wants to rematch. No, he's fighting him because they couldn't do the logistics and they couldn't get enough money to get him to step aside. And the timings didn't work for Fury. He's not fighting Usyk again for any other reason, but he doesn't have any other option. So let's just say Usyk Joshua steps aside, Usyk fights Fury. So that fight probably takes 4 or 5 months to make. Then Joshua gets a shot at the winner. Where's Dillian Whyte? Who's Dillian Whyte's promoter? I thought it was Eddie Hearn.
Yeah.
So who's looking out for Dillian Whyte? Why isn't Dillian Whyte not saying, oh, hang on a minute, you're talking step aside. I want my shot. So-called 1,000 days I've been waiting for my shot. So 1,000 days plus what will probably be another 18 months if you think, Usyk fights Fury, Fury fights Joshua. You're probably looking at 18 months for both of those fights to pan out. Who's looking out?
2,000 days then, isn't he?
Exactly. So I'm not a fan of, just said I'm not supporting Dillian Whyte. I'm saying, Eddie Hearn, is your job to promote both fighters? Or are you just, fuck you, Dillian Whyte, I don't care about you. I'm only worried about AJ because he's the cash cow. And obviously that's the case, but why has nobody been jumping up and down before all this was resolved in the last few days? Why has nobody been up and down, jumping up and down saying, I want Dillian Whyte to get his shot? Let everything play out, but let Dillian Whyte's got his shot. So I think he's been the story that's been left out of the picture in all of this. And I understand it's financial and it's all this kind of stuff. But Dillian Whyte, as we just said, might have been them waiting for 2,000 days. It just becomes ridiculous. So then you've got the rest of the piece where what Eddie's now going to be, the narrative that Eddie's going to be saying, and he's already started saying, is that, you see, he's very clever how he words things with Eddie Hearn. I saw something recently on IFL where he'd said, Usyk's people think Fury's bottled it. So he hasn't said, I think Fury's bottled it. That's the basically the suggestion that he's saying. He's saying Usyk's people think Fury's bottled it. Well, Joshua didn't bottle it against Usyk, and now he's going to fight him a second time. So the narrative is Joshua's focused on getting revenge, etc., etc. And it becomes really boring and insulting, actually, to the fans. We all know why things have happened over the last few days. I think there's two drivers. The first driver is that they couldn't pay Joshua enough. Whatever he was asking for, and obviously Whyte would have got a part of that, they couldn't pay Joshua, Hearn and Whyte enough to step aside. The second part of it, and it's a part I admire about Tyson Fury, is because the Saudis, because the month of Ramadan's in April, that meant that should Usyk and Tyson Fury fight, you could be looking at May, June, you're probably looking at July for that fight. And Fury wants to fight. Fury's like, I'm fucking sick of this. I'm sick of fighting once a flood. I want to fight. So I think there's the element that they couldn't come up with enough cash, and there's the element that Fury wants to fight. And we've got the situation at the moment what feels like a situation that nobody really wants. I think Fury will be probably the happiest out of the bunch of all these people, because ultimately he's fighting, he becomes a little bit more active again. I don't think Joshua's going to be happy with this. Joshua's got to going back in with Usyk again. Eddie potentially in 2 fights now could lose any. I mean, he's hanging on to the heavyweight division by the fingertips, isn't he? And Eddie could really be out of the heavyweight picture now within a 4 months window by getting Joshua beat and Dillian White beat.
A few years ago, you may remember that Dillian White fought Chisora the first time. Well, he followed me on Twitter. I was on Twitter then, and I followed him, and I sent him a direct message not long after. I said, "Oh, you'll have to fight Chisora again." He went, "No, that's done. That's put to bed." I went, "No, you'll be fighting him again." No, I won't, bruv. Well, what happened? He did. Now, it won't surprise me if they wheel Derek Chisora out again for Dillian White. And Anthony Joshua, he takes an interim fight before Usyk. This is what Eddie will be looking at now. Maybe Anthony Joshua might take Joe Parker on. Do you know what I mean? But he does not want Usyk. And Dillian White definitely doesn't want to fight Tyson Fury. The silence, I mean, what we're on now, 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon. We've not heard a peep at Dillian White, have we?
Already. Very quiet. And that's the one thing that's the one thing you and I have said from day one. Whilst a lot of what comes out of Tyson Fury's mouth is so contradictory and you don't always believe a lot of it, we both admit, love him or not, he's a fighter and he will fight anybody. He really will.
But is his CV that good, Julian? I know he's saying he's better.
I don't think anybody's CV can be great at heavyweight at the moment, Russell, because I don't think the opposition's that great.
Fights are happening.
Well, nothing. I mean, it's
DeBar and Joyce. What were they fighting? They haven't even got dates.
Well, I always thought, and I've been criticised for this, and I've said this so many times. I always thought that Wilder was so poor. I just thought it was a really poor WBC champion, but he had massive power. Of course he did. He had the great equaliser, but I just didn't rate Wilder as highly as everybody else. I think I was similar with Anthony Joshua. I kind of liked him in some ways, and I thought he was a good ambassador for boxing in some ways. In other ways, he let himself down. But I quite liked him. The family like him. Joshua seems kind of popular. But Fury, I just always thought was just the most charismatic of the bunch. And Fury as well is more interested in the ropes. But he's also more interested outside the ropes. But for me, the heavyweight division is shallow. And what we keep getting told now is it's as good as it's been since the golden era, etc., etc. But I think if you look at Lennox Lewis, Holyfield, for example, and we're not going back to the 80s because I always get ripped to bits saying I'm an 80s obsessed. So let's go back to Holyfield, Lewis, and Riddick Bowe. Talent-wise, I'm not talking. Listen, Riddick Bowe was an underachiever. His career was anticlimactic. He only got beat once, by the way, as you know. But talent-wise, Bowe was a fantastic fighter. Evander Holyfield's an all-time great. And Lennox Lewis is an all-time great. If you look at the CVs of those guys, and I understand Fury, Usyk, etc., they haven't completed the career. That I understand. You often have to judge a fighter at the end of the career, but the amount of times that these guys are fighting once a year, once every 18 months, these guys are not going to amass the CV of an Ali or a Joe Lewis or anybody like that, and they're certainly not going to get a CV of a Lennox Lewis simply because they're fighting so infrequently. And I mean, you got Tyson Fury and Wilder. They've effectively tied up each other's careers, haven't they, for like pushing on 3 years? It's like, and that's why I really struggle, as you know, with rematch clauses, etc., etc. And I've been sort of criticized for that over the years, but it holds everything up. And what have we got now? We've got Joshua again having a rematch with Usyk, if it happens, by the way. So we've got that, and again, it's holding everything up. And we've talked about this, but obviously White's getting his shot now. What about Joe Joyce?
Yeah,
what's going to happen?
Yeah, well, let me just back up a little bit. You mentioned about Joshua holding everything up, but yet he's willing to ask for 20 million to not hold it up and let the undisputed happen, and Fury do his dirty work again, like he did with Vladimir, like he did with Wilder. Joshua's swerved a lot of people. They keep saying he's a throwback. Now, Sam Jones made it, before we come to Joyce DeBar stuff and Dave Allen, Cash Alley, because they're all parked up, aren't they?
Yeah.
Sam Jones has just come out on social media now, and he said that Anthony Joshua is a throwback fighter. How can he be a throwback fighter when he's been manoeuvred through choppy waters, swerved everybody, and now he's asking for millions to not get in with Usyk so Fury can? So that's, to me, a throwback fighter. I don't know what you think about that, Julian.
No, he's definitely not a throwback fighter. I mean, if you look at some of his biggest wins, so they may be his biggest, they may not. Obviously, we've got Klitschko. Yeah, Klitschko was, he'd one foot in a retirement home. Pulev was, again, I mean, how old was Pulev? 40 years old. We've got Povetkin. These are old men. Sorry, these are Povetkin, when he was in his absolute heyday, would have gone through Anthony Joshua like a hot knife through butter. He'd have wiped Joshua out. He was a dangerous, formidable fighter, was Povetkin. Klitschko, obviously, had the bet. They couldn't have met because of their ages, but Klitschko is absolute best. While safety first, he was a clinical, solid fighter with a massive power. So Klitschko's levels above Anthony Joshua, and it's all about time. And Pulev was kind of fringe, but again, he was an old man. So when you're looking, and Takam, how old was Takam? Takam was, he must have been not that far off his old age pension. So these fighters, this throwback Anthony Joshua, this is not Mike Tyson wiping out the heavyweight division from 1986 to 1990, is it? This is cherry picking fighters who the fans recognize. The fans recognize some of these fighters and some of these names, and that makes for being a great promoter and great commercial television and great events. But this is not fighters, like I said, going straight through the heavyweight.
Do you feel, Julian, that fighters are not doing their duty as a fighter and fighting the proper fights for the fans? They're like holding back and coming out with excuses and hiding behind promoters and TV companies and the Cold Wars and all this and injuries. And do you feel that that's what we've got at the moment, so that people can get to the promised land?
We definitely have an element of that, and I understand, fighters' career after he retires can be quite lonely and it can be quite painful, and they have to look after themselves. But there becomes an extreme, doesn't it? So it's a slight different answer to your question. But one thing that's always frustrated me is when people talk about, that fighters can't fight 3 or 4 times a year. That's an insane schedule. I keep hearing people say that fighters can't fight 4 times a year. It's an insane schedule, and you just can't do that. It's absolute nonsense, by the way. It's absolute nonsense. When I worked with Sykes, we did, I think we did 7 12-rounders. And Sykes was always in tip-top shape for his 12-rounders when he was at his best. Obviously, past his best was a different thing. So we were talking about between 5 and 7 weeks we had for a camp. And I keep hearing all this shit now about, we've got a 14-week camp and fighters can only fight twice a year because they have a 14-week camp. One of the big reasons fighters fight so infrequently now, it's nothing to do with the wear and the tear on the body. It's to do with greedy promoters squeezing.
Strength and conditions, point spoken.
Oh, strength and conditioning. Wow, yeah. All this absolute nonsense.
Everybody's a strength and conditioner hanging around fighters, and what they do, they start picking pads up, don't they, in camp and befriending fighters. Yeah. I've seen it happen, mate. I know what goes on.
Honestly, I've been around it. Gary had some people who worked on elements of that, but they were briefed by me and they had a very minor role. But now what you see, like I said, these S&C coaches, I mean, they always make me laugh because people don't truly understand what the word conditioning is. People think conditioning is about getting someone fit and about getting their aerobic and the cardio and the anaerobic levels up, etc., etc. Conditioning is getting you conditioned for the event that you're about to take place in. And I always think whenever I've looked at strength conditioners, some of the things that you have to do has to be absolutely relevant to the boxing, to what fighters have to do. And I look at some of the stuff I always think back what, you know, when fighters warm up in the dressing rooms, and I've heard this from, I won't mention the name, but I've heard of, like, this guy's a former British champion, by the way, that he was enlisted the help of a strength conditioner, and it was in the dressing room warming up for the fight, and his S&C coach had him doing these crazy stretches and crazy squats and things that would be really heavy on his legs. And the head coach came in and it went absolutely nuts. And he says, "What are you fucking doing? You don't do all this stuff." This was like half an hour before the fight, the warm up. Crazy, like lunges and this and that and the other. Well, this fighter, his legs were gone in the first round. He managed to win, but he got knocked down twice in the first round by a journeyman, and he only just managed to hang on. And this is a former British champion, a high-level fighter. And this is just a good example of these S&C coaches who, a lot of them ain't got a fucking clue what they're doing. There are certain rituals that we do in boxing. You know, Sykes did certain elements, and one of the reasons I did it was to keep him in the gym during the day, to keep him busy, keep his mind sharp, and it should always be supplementary. But to your point, what happens is you get the likes of like Alex Ariza, you get an arsehole like him, who, he knows his stuff, of course he knows his stuff. He starts to think he's a boxing coach, and he starts to talk about the philosophy of boxing, and he's in the corner and he starts to talk over Freddie Roach and whoever. And Alex Ariza becomes this renowned boxing coach. And it's like, you're a glorified S&C coach, mate. You're a PT coach.
Nutrition guy when he started, wasn't he?
Absolutely. But they think they understand boxing. And, you know, we talk about this all the time. There are a lot of coaches who don't understand boxing in its truest sense. And so what chance have these guys got? So there's a place for them, but the place for them is not in the corner on fight night, as far as I'm concerned. I won't have them anywhere near the corner.
Well, my opinion is this, and I'm not going to say which trainers agree with me on this, but they are old school ones, that strength and conditioners, right, are not needed in the sport of boxing. All the boxer needs is his trainer, because his trainer will know what exercises you need to do and when you should eat and not eat. And if a boxer don't know when he's a world champion, what time to go to bed and what to eat and that, he needs to pack the game in. It's not babysitting, is it?
People keep talking. You know, one of the things that really frustrates me, Russell, is I saw some, like, this is why I don't spend much time on social media. So I was on YouTube the other day, and sometimes you're bored and you pick at something. And someone had asked the question that said, how would these fighters do today? And it was, I can't remember who the fighters were, but it was some great fighters from the 80s and maybe the 90s. And people were chirping in going, they don't have a fucking clue. The game's moved on so much and people are so much fitter and so much stronger. And I was about to, like, literally just rip in, and I didn't bother, because you know, if you argue with a fool, it makes two fools, doesn't it? So
you get people coming out with, "What's his resume?" Or if you say anything, they'll just say, "Go to Adam, move the dartboard."
Honestly, it's absolute nonsense. It's like, so you show me, I watch I'll select a few fights. I think of a fight like, you know, like Carlos Zarate, Zamora. I think of Luke Pinto, Wilfred Gomez. These guys were, and the obvious one, the Leonard and Duran in Montreal, 15 rounders. Show me 12 rounders now. Show me champions who can fight not only at that pace that those guys used to fight at, but and do the subtle things like that the Pinto and Gomez did in their epic fight back in 1983. Show me fighters who can do that and who can fight at that pace. They didn't have S&C.
Yeah.
They didn't have strength conditioners. They didn't have nutritionists and fucking 6 chefs in the kitchen. They just had knowledgeable, they were dedicated fighters. They were in the gym all the year round. They had coaches who really understood, you know, as like Ray Arcel, for example. So Ray Arcel, everybody knows he was Duran's, you know, head coach. Ray Arcel had 20 world champions, not 20 IBF champions and regular WBA champions. Ray Arcel had 20 unified world champions. You know, you look at people like that and who they have worked with, and then those fighters in those eras, like Duran against Esteban Diaz, the pace and the ferocity and the skill level in those fights is unmatched today. So when people say boxing's moved on, sports moved on, it's like, the thing is, they say this and it becomes a soundbite. It's just things that they've heard of people. Tell me where it's moved on.
Same, we've got same. We're having same 12 rounds as we were in 80s. Gloves at same gum shield, same 3-minute rounds. There's no judges sat in booths, so it's even and all that. Everything's still the same as it were, apart from it were 15 rounds back in day before 12. But other than that, nothing's changed as it was changed. Nothing's changed.
So, I saw someone say, this was about 2 years ago, the common belief was, and I think there's several high-level people in boxing said 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, Anthony Joshua was the best conditioned heavyweight in the world. So I've heard that from so many people. As modern training things, we've all seen the stuff he does. Now, Anthony Joshua, when he fought Klitschko, he didn't throw a punch for 4 rounds. He had about a few probing jabs, started hyperventilating because he couldn't gauge the range. And
they gave him 3 of them rounds though, didn't they?
Well, I'm surprised they weren't 10-8s. And then round 5, obviously, we saw what happened, and then it dropped, blah, blah, blah. He scored the knockdown, he got dropped. And what happened effectively was he had a fight, rounds 5, and the first part of round 6 when he was nearly knocked out. He was absolutely knackered. And then from round 6 to round 10, Joshua again had another 4 rounds where he couldn't recover. He took all his time to recover. Klitschko's tank was emptying because he was an old man, he's inactive. And this is the best conditioned heavyweight, okay, in the world, apparently. You've got Anthony Joshua, who in the Klitschko fight probably had 3 action-packed rounds in that whole 11 rounds, where he let his hands go. And on each occasion, it took him 4 rounds to recover. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the people who come out with this absolute garbage. Watch Larry Holmes against Ken Norton. You will see 15 rounds where the referee never calls break, and they do not stop for 15 rounds. Larry Holmes wasn't shredded. He didn't have a 6-pack. He was like 15 stone 2, 15 stone 3 at his best, and not the biggest, best built heavyweight in the world. And then Kenny Norton obviously was conditioned. Holmes and Norton, 1978, June the 9th. One of the just
vacant belt, wasn't it? Ali vacated.
That's the one, absolutely.
Number 1 and number 2 fought it. They were none of this step aside, were they?
And they never stopped, and there was no bitching and no complaining, and there was no controversy. It was a close fight. But the pace of that, but yet we're expected to believe that heavyweight boxers are better conditioned now than they've ever been. So let's look at Canelo Alvarez against Callum Smith. Okay, let's look at the pace of that fight.
Alvarez. Let me just stop there. Ken Norton might have been champion actually. Then I think he got.
Yeah, it was the first.
Yeah.
That's right. Ken Norton was instilled as WBC champion because Ali wouldn't give him a rematch. It was the first heavyweight to win the belt.
Shouldn't have been though. Should have been just 1 and 2 fighting for it, shouldn't it? Really?
Yeah, 100%. So if you look at that, you look at Alvarez against Callum Smith. You look at the pace of Canelo against Billy Joe Saunders. These are not high octane, fast-paced fights. Billy Joe Saunders' tank, after 4 or 5 rounds with Alvarez, started to go. And this is a guy who's not throwing a lot of shots. And then these people, I keep pointing to the same stuff. I'll say, watch Marvin Hagler against John McGarvey. You're talking about conditioning. Yeah. You talk shit. Hagler had the Petronellis in camp. Hagler chopped wood. Hagler ran every day, 6 miles, including Christmas Day. Hagler was a gym rat. He was always in the gym. His conditioning was off the scale. He wasn't doing deadlifting. He wasn't doing this. He didn't have resistance bands and kettlebells, and he didn't have people making his tea. Hagler was the best conditioned fighter in the world in 1986. You cannot compare Hagler McGarvey against Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders. But yet people keep telling me, Russell, boxing's moved on. Boxing's evolved.
Fuck. Bullshit.
Can you use these? People need to use their eyes, honestly. It's just nonsense.
Well, back to the nature at hand. Right. Eddie Hearn last Wednesday said Dillian White knocks Fury out. If he gets the fight, he knocks him out. Right. We're nearly 24 hours here. No word from them. Do they want the fight? Dillian White and Fury? Does it happen? Yes or no? Or are we going to see Warren and Earn and all this backbiting and everybody trying to outdo each other. And I mean, I'm even hearing them going on about purse bids. Well, it ain't really 41 million because there's this happening and that. And they can't even fucking do it right, can they?
No, they can't do it right. And, you know, people, I heard the word the last couple of days, you know, that these fights are so difficult to put together. And the process is really convoluted. I kept hearing the word convoluted all the time. And people, listen, redeploying troops, NATO redeploying troops is a complex process. You know, the United Nations redeploying aid to a war-torn country or a country what's had natural disasters is a massively convoluted process. Getting two fighters in a ring, and I'm not somebody who people, you don't know what goes on. It's fucking easy, mate. It's not difficult whatsoever. The problem that we've got is you've got massive egos with the promoters. You've got huge egos with the TV networks who wants to show the rights. Fighters have big egos as well. So everybody's got a big fucking egos. We've now got coaches with big egos. Coaches have got bigger egos than fucking anybody in boxing. And what happens is everybody's got a big ego. So it's not that boxing's complicated to make these fights, because if everybody used the word compromise and negotiate and everybody just walked away quite happy with the agreement, fights get made. What happens is all these guys involved, they all, you know, that Eddie Earn and all these guys, they've all got bigger balls than the fighters, haven't they? So they actually, what they want to do is they want to say, I got my own way. I got him this, I got him 60%, I got him 30 million, I got him this. And they all want things written into the contracts. They want, you know, rematch agreements, 2-fight deals, or this step aside. Nobody's happy now just to make a really simple fight. To answer the question, I'll just mention the fact that when I keep hearing the word convoluted, people trying to take the piss out of us viewers and us boxing fans. It's not that hard to make these big fights, and I don't care what anybody says. If you don't have an ego and you're prepared to compromise, these fights get made. Your fucking egos means these fights don't get made. But to answer the question, Russell, I think Fury will fight White.
Right.
I think the fight will happen. I think there'll be a lot of fun at the press conferences. I bet Eddie Hearn will be hiding away from Tyson at the press conference because he just seems to have the jitters around Tyson Fury. Fury makes no bones about the fact he really doesn't like Hearn, does he? Dillian White can hold his own at any press conferences. Whether he can with Tyson Fury around him, I really don't know.
What about Shane Fury? Him and Dean White don't get on, do they?
Exactly. So there's that thing there, and
the big John Fury background, won't they, over and around?
The fight's in the UK, so John Fury doesn't have to worry about not having access, does he?
Running around on that hard, bro.
So you've got some entertainment, and it is
yeah, but they're talking about this more, and Frank Warren and Eddie at presser, we're talking about this more than the fight.
Then the fight, and that's the point, isn't it? It's not about Dean White and Shane Fury and all this guy. It's about the fight. As a fight, I think it's a decent fight. Naturally, Tyson Fury is going to be a big favourite. The chance that Dillian White has, people keep saying he's a big puncher. Well, there's no bigger puncher than Deontay Wilder, and he's had three fights to try and finish Tyson Fury off, and he hasn't managed it. We all know Fury can get knocked down. He's been knocked down several times before, but God, he knows how to recover from a punch. He's been
on floor only 8 times, is it?
Yeah, he's been on that floor so many times, and it's almost like you've got to nail the guy to the floor to finish him off. So, Dillian White, he could hurt Fury. Little doubt about that. If he's fired up, if he catches him, but I find him a little bit too lazy. He's a little bit too easy to hit. He had a life and death with Chisora, didn't he? Twice.
Two life and death.
Exactly. So I can't see. It's really hard to make a case for Dillian White beating Fury. And I think Fury's a consummate professional in that he'll get up for the fight. It's not something that he'll just not prepare for and he's looking at the next thing. He's a fighting man. He'll be ready for that fight. And I'd be surprised if it goes 12 rounds, but I think it'd be a decent fight.
Okay. I was the one who brought the story before anybody, saying that Ruiz Joshua rematch would be £25, and everybody said I was talking baloney. Well, I got it right, didn't I? This one, I think it'll still be £25. A lot of people are saying it could be £30. Are we going to have Eddie Hearn coming out saying, oh, they're going to charge 30 quid to rip fans off, and that'll be kettle calling, pot calling kettle, won't it, or something? Do you feel that they'll go £25 or 30? What do you feel? I think 25.
I think it'll be 25 quid. Eddie is going to have plenty to say about this, isn't he? Because he's not controlling the fight. But ultimately, I guess with inflation and stuff, I don't love pay-per-view, but we pay it, don't we? You've got a choice, you pay it or you don't. And will I pay 25 quid for it? Yeah, I probably will do. If there's a good undercard on it, I'll pay 25 quid, but I'm probably more paying 25 quid to watch Tyson Fury.
If Dillian Whyte pulls out this fight and goes another route, and if Big Meech pulls out and goes another route other than Usyk, is their reputations in tatters?
Well, they have to be, don't they? Because all we've heard about is, so to start with Dillian Whyte, all we hear about with him is I've been mandatory for, according to him, mandatory for 1,000 days, etc. Everybody keeps saying, when's he going to get his chance? So you've got your chance now. You're going to get 6 million, plus no doubt big sponsorships and other things thrown on top of that. You're getting 6 million, mate. You've got your chance. You've had a chance that you've turned down so far. You had a chance, as we know, with Joshua before. This is your chance to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world. So if you step out of that, and I've just been defending you earlier on in this show, if you step out of it, your reputations, people just won't take you seriously. It's as simple as that. In terms of Anthony Joshua, he's in a really difficult position. For Joshua to beat Usyk, Joshua has to, first of all, he has to put things in the toolbox. Because you and I, we said before, we thought Usyk would play with him. And I struggled with the fact that Joshua was a big favourite. I really did.
We said it'd be a walking park for Usyk, didn't we?
100%. I couldn't make a case at all for Joshua winning that fight. So as far as I'm concerned, Joshua's got to do things that he didn't do in the first fight, and he's got to have tools that he doesn't possess right now. He's got to be on his absolute best game. And I think Usyk has to maybe, because sometimes, a bit more inactivity, miles on the clock. Usyk's had a massively long, he looked really good last time, by the way, but he's had a massively long career, amateur career. The only hope he's got is that Joshua performs out of his skin and Usyk's a little bit on the slide or just can't quite repeat that performance. And even then, you'd have to make Usyk a slight favourite, wouldn't you? It's really difficult trying to find a justification for Joshua winning that fight. I can only find a justification for Usyk possibly losing the fight just by not being the same fighter that he was. But that's a kind of a song of a truly desperate to think that might have slipped since the box. But I don't know. What I do know is, I love following coaches, and you could have Eddie Futch and George Benton and Lou Duver in camp with Joshua, and those guys couldn't give him the skills that he needs to be a complete fighter in 2 years, never mind in 4 or 5 months.
Okay. Do you think that Big Meech, aka Joshua, do you think Big Meech has kind of like lost it in recent times, recently, last year or 18 months or so, because he were preaching stay humble and stay hungry and I'm a nice guy and it's a fight and I want everybody to do well and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes down to it, there's been things that have gone on and been brushed away. Like, I don't like to get personal, but everybody knows he had a kid to a pole dancer, and it was all kept quiet for a long time, wasn't it? And then when it looked like he had to come out and admit it because of DNA test, there were pictures of him on beach in Dubai with kid, and I was perhaps getting to Dubai on a private beach you were on, and things like that. And the Eddie Chambers tweet, direct messages to Eddie Chambers about the black superior race and the Black Lives Matter speech, and And now he's come out and he's said, I'm not about that life. I'm about this life. My heroes are Larry Hoover, Big Meech, for Dickie Barnes, all big heroin and crack dealers. And as the mask slipped a little bit, because he was swearing a lot in interviews and I'm going to effing kill Usyk rematch and I'm about that life and all that. Do you think that he's going through a bit of a change because he's not this invincible guy? They built him up, and really he's been built. He's like a building or a mansion that's been built, but it's been built on a swamp, hasn't it? Basically.
Absolutely. I think Anthony Joshua's quite lost right now. And usually the way that people come back when the confidence is low is they can be quite aggressive or they can be quite assertive and behave out of character. I did see the little video he put out a couple of days ago when he was saying, oh, I ain't fucking agreed to nothing, step aside. I'm intelligent, I'm in control of my own career. And I just thought it was something unlike him to do. And
yeah,
I think you're right. There's little things that he's doing, whereas he's clearly not happy. He's clearly not comfortable with everything that's going on. The one thing that I do hope that he does, and this might have happened, by the way, I hope, clearly he's not going to be working with Rob McCracken again. What I hope is, and I don't know the details, I hope it wasn't an email letting McCracken go. I hope he's had the decency to go, because we've all seen AJ giving his former amateur coach big BMWs and stuff. We've all seen that, haven't we? And how generous he is.
he gave an M6, didn't he? That guy at
that's right.
M6.
Well,
I
hope what he's done is I hope he's had a conversation with Rob McCracken and sat down with him and explained why he's stepping away, because there's so many high-profile fighters over the years, and I think Amir Khan was one of them, who the first time that the trainer, the guys who have got them to that position, have been told that they're working with someone else is when they've seen it on social media or they've seen it on the TV. So I might be wrong. That's just one thing I want to get out there, that I hope Anthony Joshua has had a conversation with Robert McCracken and really thanked him for everything that he's done, and he's explained why he wants to go with somebody else, because that coach-boxer relationship is supposed to be a sacred one. So I hope that's happened. I think as the mask slipped, I don't think it slipped as such, because I think the nice guy image is often something that the promoters and the PR people try and get out there. I don't think Joshua's ever said, I'm a nice guy and I walk on water, Russell. I think it's just him. I think so. It's just the people around him. So nobody's ever as, it's like one of those things, isn't it? No one's ever as nice as people tell you that they are, and no one's ever as bad as they are portrayed. I like to think everybody's got good in them, we all make mistakes, but he's just a human being. He's an athlete. He's definitely not as smart as he thinks he is. You know, he's saying things like, I'm intelligent, I control my career. You're definitely not that smart, Anthony. I don't mean to be rude there.
They were driving around in London one with a 9-bar of weed in boot in a GB sponsored Merc, Olympic tracksuit on, and he's got not Olympic tracksuit, GB trackie on, and he's speeding. Copper pulled him to give him a ticket and went, so that smelt weed. That's not smart, is it?
No, he's not smart. I think he's probably a decent guy, but he's just clearly been hurt by I think his confidence is on the floor. It absolutely is. He's looking for that magic wand, isn't it, for some coach to give him something, you know, make me a dog or give me this or turn me into this or turn me into that. It's not going to happen ultimately. And I don't think I've said this before, I really don't. I think he's done massively well, gold medalist, world champion, but I think he's a natural athlete who's gone down the route of professional fighting. I don't think he's a natural fighter. Tyson Fury is a natural fighter. I don't think he's a natural fighter.
Tyson's not an athlete though, is he?
Well, but no, he's not. He's definitely not. He's a hell of a pugilist, isn't he? And I think Joshua, when it comes to it, you've got that or you haven't done. And I always think of what Emmanuel Stewart said about Vladimir Klitschko and Lennox Lewis, because he trained them both, obviously, and he did a fantastic job with them both. But he once got asked about those two fighters, and he said the thing is with Lennox, he could always go to the street, and Lennox always had that where he could have a tear up if he had to. And Klitschko, whenever Klitschko got into those tear ups, like against Lemon Brewster and Corey Sanders, he fell to pieces, didn't he? And I think that's the difference with Fury and Usyk and all these guys, I think Usyk, Fury, they'll have a fight, they'll have a rumble. When it really comes to it and the back's against the wall, you know that they'll fight out of that position. Whereas Joshua, you can't help what's inside. And Joshua, in a real dogfight, when it matters, will always crumble because he's got that fragility about him, and he's not a natural fighter. I really don't believe he is.
Yeah. What do you think, Julian, about these are just a handful of people? Tony Sims, Crusher Ben, that's Conor Ben, Tony Sims, Crusher, Sam Jones, the Gad, Gareth A. Davis, Coogan, Tony Bellew, Adam Cattrall at TalkSport, Fat Tony Bellew, I've mentioned him, haven't we? I nearly said Fat Tony Salerno, then it's Fat Tony Bellew. Or just Fat Tony, we call him in South Yorkshire. Derek Chisora, they've all come out and they haven't got a problem with Joshua taking 15 million step aside and swerving Usyk. There's not a problem. But then they're all Macho FC, aren't they? They've got the noses in the trough, haven't they?
Yeah, of course they are.
It's not the general feeling of the people I speak to in boxing, because the people I speak to in boxing, and you know, we're not going to say the names in here. These people are like, what's going on here? What is going on? Whatever happened to fighting? The
general feeling is like, you're an athlete, so you're a competitor. This is what you do. This is what you love. This is your job. Now, for me to step aside, I saw Simon Jordan on TalkSport recently, and he was coming across the same as I am, and where you're coming from. He was like, I don't understand it, because you're talking all the time about legacy. It's all about the legacy. It's about my legacy fights, my legacy fights. And then you're uttering the words step aside. And we all know he hasn't taken the step aside because the numbers and the dates didn't match. It wasn't because he wasn't prepared to step aside. He was absolutely prepared to step aside, because if he wasn't, the first time this was mentioned, he would have gone on social media, seeing as he controls his own career, and said, I don't care what people are talking about. You can offer me 100 million. I'm not stepping aside. Yeah, well, they activated the rematch clause, didn't they, October 8th? So that's activated. Eddie said last week that fight's definitely on. But point I want to make is with these rematch clauses, and we Eddie Hearn dealing with rematch clauses, Joshua Usyk, they tried to get out of it. There were a rematch clause. Galahad and Martinez. Galahad can beat Martinez again. He was just unlucky he got caught on him, but they've moved him aside, or he stepped up, so that, because then he lost money on that show, the Sheffield show, and he didn't want to back Galahad again. He'll be a away fight or whatever Galahad has to do now. Yeah. Terry Harper had a rematch clause. She got iced, didn't she, put into orbit? She didn't accept that. That were an Eddie rematch clause. So why do these people accept these rematch clauses? And when they get put into orbit, all of a sudden they've got a problem with weight. Harper and Galahad, oh, we're moving up, weight problems. But yet they passed all check weigh-ins. And why sign a contract for 2 fights at that weight if you're struggling in the first fight for the first fight at that weight? Because if they'd have won it, they'd have still been defending it at that belt, wouldn't they? They wouldn't have moved up. So you can't have it both ways. So do these contracts we Eddie Hearn now, do they mean anything now? They absolutely, they only mean something when Eddie wants to activate the rematch clause because it suits him. They don't mean anything if it doesn't suit him. It's as simple as that. I mean, like I heard him talking about Galahad now, and we need to move him to 9-4. And he was always talking about moving Kell Brook up, wasn't he? But yeah, he was happy to bring him back down against Spence. I don't think Eddie Hearn understands the weight making process. I think that's the coach and the boxer's job. So he needs to stop coming across like he really understands it. The fight is looking dead at the weight, he's looking drawn and stuff. How many times do we hear people on social media when you see a live weighing and a fighter doesn't look great on the scale, so it looks dead at the weight, and then that fighter gets in the ring and performs really well? What happened with Galahad? He got caught with a massive fucking shot. That is it. That shot from a puncher. From a puncher, 9 stone, 9'4". Don't care what weight you got cracked at. You're going down from that shot. It was a huge punch. Both of them were the end of the round knockdown, beginning of the round. Massive right hands straight onto them. You're going over. Terry Harper got absolutely trounced by somebody who had 5 times the boxing skills, 5 times the speed, 5 times the power that she did. Once again, if that had been at super featherweight or lightweight, it wouldn't make any difference. If someone's hits you hard, you stay hit. If someone's just way better than you, stop using the weight as an excuse. And
The other men all check weigh-ins were okay, weren't they?
well, what we didn't hear from Eddie Hearn was before Galahad fought Martinez, we didn't hear Eddie say, well, what the plan is with Galahad, because he's struggling with the weight, he's going to defend his featherweight title tonight, and then his ambition to become a multi-weight champion. Never mentioned it. No one ever mentioned Galahad moving up. No one's mentioned his struggle. Yeah, he's a big big at featherweight, but Galahad was a super bantamweight. He's already moved up once as Galahad. He's not somebody who's been a career featherweight like Josh Warrington, for example. So Galahad, I don't think there was much of an issue at the weight. He got cracked, and Eddie wants him out of the featherweight picture now because it stops the fight with Warrington fighting Lee Wood, doesn't it, for a unification? That's the fight Eddie wants to promote next. Galahad would put paid to that. As you know, he couldn't draw flies to a dump, unfortunately. So move him out of the picture. Give him
We're not saying he's not multi-skilled, though, are we?
No, Galahad's a good fighter. Galahad sparred Sykes about 4 times, and he really had Sykes' number. He was a really clever fighter, really deceptively strong. No issue with Galahad as a world-class fighter whatsoever. He got knocked out by an absolute, just like Lennox Lewis got banged out, that the right hand that Hasim Rahman hit him with was an absolute humdinger of a shot. Was Lewis prepared? Was he not? I don't think it matters. You get hit with a punch like that, it's a fight changer. That can happen to any boxer, but Galahad's massively skilled. But what's going to happen now? He's going to fight for a couple of fights at super featherweight, get a fight at super featherweight for a title, probably get beat because he's on the wrong end of 30 now, isn't he? And it just shows, doesn't it, what you and I said, and we talked about the first time I came on your show. Boxing's a popularity contest. It's absolutely proven. You know, I like Josh. I know Josh and his dad, Sean. Josh's popularity has got him the fight against Martinez. It's as simple as that. It's popularity.
He said he needs to make up the money he lost with him, doesn't he, Galahad?
Yeah, absolutely, and he will do. Josh will pack out the arena like he always does. It'd be a good night, be a great fight, good TV event. And I guess it just shows, doesn't it, that it's just one of those things. And this is where we're at now. You know, fighters a long, long time ago didn't have to sell tickets, did they? So the good fighters eventually came through. Yeah. You know, I always think of Marvin Hagler. Had Marvin Hagler been around in this era, he probably wouldn't have been a world champion. He'd have been avoided like the plague. He wouldn't have sold massive tickets. He wasn't an all-star amateur when he turned over. And, you know, when he got beat early on in his career by, was it Sugar Ray Seals and those guys, Willie Monroe, when Hagler got beat early on in his career, he wouldn't have got the rematch, would he? And revenge those fights. Hagler would have just been avoided and just fallen through the cracks. And that shows the difference in boxing now to like you know, with Conor Benn, we can't do a show without not talking about Conor Benn. Conor Benn can fight a little bit, it's exciting, but Conor Benn is called Conor Benn. He's not called Conor Smith, is he? As we've said, and he's massively, he's massively popular. He's now becoming a real ticket seller in his own right. He's going to command these massive paydays, and it's not because of his skills, and it's not because of everything else. It's just because it's a popularity contest, and he does big numbers wherever he goes. And it's just the game's changed. Eddie keeps saying game changer. The game has changed, but it's not changed in that it's a level playing field. It's changed that if you're popular, of course you still have to be able to fight a little bit. If you're popular, you can have a good career, you can earn millions, and sometimes you can navigate through that career without ever really truly being an elite world champion. It's insane.
Okay. The rumor is Eddie's going to be working with Jake Paul moving forward. Do you think that's just like a little dig at the Furies because the Jake Paul Tommy Fury fight didn't happen, and there's a bit of bad blood between Furies and Hearn, as well as obviously Warren's Team Fury in it at the moment? Do you feel that they can't leave it alone, keep having to have sniping and little digs at each other, and that the fans are suffering because of this? Yeah,
the fans are definitely suffering. It's such a shame. So I know he's working with Jake Paul for the Katie Taylor-Serrano fight, and it's the biggest fight in women's boxing. And personally, I think Clarissa Shields and Marshall, if that happens, will be a much bigger, better fight. It really would be more dynamic. But you know, I saw Eddie. I skim this stuff, as you know. I don't watch all this stuff. I watch the short ones. I saw Eddie talking about Jake Paul, saying, "Oh, he's fantastic, he's hilarious," and I think he definitely is. I think he's just he's having a dig at the Furies. The Furies are having a dig at Eddie. You know, if Tyson Fury's been videos just laughing. We all know he's laughing at, don't we? In these videos he's releasing, and it's like school playground behavior, isn't it? I find it insane, and I'm guessing now that he's a connoisseur of boxing, is Jake Paul. I mean, the guy probably couldn't tell you who Sandy Sadler is, but he's a connoisseur of boxing. And this is where we're at. But you know what? We might as well have Jake Paul as a big promoter in boxing. You know, we might as well have some of these comedians on as well. You know, let's have Joe Brand and these guys as Alan Carr. Let these guys be boxing promoters.
Arg you know Arg who went with Gemma Collins. He's having a boxing match on TV.
Oh, he was the guy who lost all that weight, wasn't he? And
yeah.
I only know who these people are because people talk about them at work, and I'm like, I didn't even know Gemma Collins was, and someone showed me a Falling on Ice, and she's like, Gemma Collins, the GC, and I'm like, I don't know who these people are.
The GC.
The GC, I'm like, who are they? They're like Gemma Collins. You're like, never, who's Gemma Collins? What's she been in? What is she, a singer? Is she an author? I don't know. What is she? So listen, let them all have a go at it, mate. The purity of boxing went a long, long time ago. And when I cling on to boxing is when I sit down and I watch a fight like Lopez and Kambosos, and you get a real surprise and a surprising result and a fantastic fight. And that's when I love boxing. And I think, do you know what? That's absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed that. And then I try and shut off from all this absolute shit.
Yeah. Okay. We spoke about the British heavyweights earlier. Joe Joyce, Dubois, Cash Ali, Dave Allen. They're all parked up at the moment. Dave Allen's on a show, Dennis Hobson's show, 2 weeks today. So's Cash Ali. They haven't got opponents. Why don't Dennis put them in together?
Well, I would do. You listen, put them in together. They'll probably have a cracking fight, and the winner goes on. The loser doesn't mean say that they haven't got a career, because we're not talking about elite heavyweights here, are we? We're not talking about guys who are challenging for world titles. We're just talking about two pretty decent, lower top 10 domestic heavyweights. What's the damage if one of them gets beat? None at all. Put them in together. Let them have 3 fights. Who cares? It's just, what are you parking them up for? You're parking them up because you're waiting for a big fight. You're waiting for the phone to ring for a big fight against a big name, so there's a money grab. But,
yeah. Joshua, throwback fighter, according to Sam Jones. Not fought Wilder. Eddie couldn't get that over the line. Didn't fight Ortiz. Eddie had Ortiz on his books at the time. Not fought Fury. Not fought Ergovic. Not fought Yoka. Their fight's cancelled, Ergovic and Yoka. Not fought Joe Joyce. And he looks like he's trying to get out of this fight with Usyk. Is that a throwback fighter?
Well, I can answer that one. And my opinion is going to be an uninformed one, because I don't really know who Sam Jones is. I'm aware of him to some extent, but you know, I know he manages Joyce and stuff. But Sam Jones, I don't know him. Right? You certainly won't know I am. I don't know if he knows what a throwback fight would be. Like, it's an uninformed opinion. Maybe he's a real historian of the game. But my instinct is Sam Jones is probably one of these guys who's got into boxing, who thinks boxing started at Mike Tyson and finished at Floyd Mayweather. There's a group of people who truly believe that's the boxing landscape, and they don't know anything that happened before that point. So what's his definition of a throwback fighter, first?
Well, a throwback fighter, you're talking Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Jack Dempsey, Gene Tunney, Marciano, them sort of guys who went in with everybody who they were told to fight. Nowadays, these people, they say the throwback fighters, but they're not, are they really? How can they be? I mean, Tyson Fury, I've heard him say he's a GOAT and this and that, but I remember not so long ago, him being offered a fight to fight Vladimir in 2012. And he didn't want to know then. And I remember him being offered Luis Ortiz before he fought Aimer, and he didn't want that smoke. That were off Golden Boy, I think, at the time. So boxing is about time, and yes, and the secret is to get in, get your money, get out with your brains intact. But I think this word throwback fighters seems to be thrown about. That's a cliche, isn't it? But it's thrown about by too many people making out that they'll do this and do that, when really, like for instance, Dillian White's made all this noise. His bluff's been called now. He's got to fight Fury, hasn't he? I mean, Spencer Feenan was saying Dillian should call Fury's bluff. Well, he's not come out and said anything, Spencer, but I could have egg on my face and Dillian White could get in there and beat Fury. He's more than capable. I mean, apparently he's dropped him in sparring, and it is true that. But sparring is different. It's a real thing, isn't it?
Sparring, things happen in the gym. I've seen fighters dropped in the gym, and then 3 weeks later, they've gone out and looked fantastic on Sky and beat really good kids. I don't read too much into it. I think I just get back to the same point when people talk. The two words that people use are throwback fighter. Those two phrases, throwback fighter and old school. And I think they're just banding them about without ever truly knowing what old school means. So listen, all right, I'm not being biased. Gary Sykes was a throwback fighter because Sykes wouldn't ask who he was boxing. He needed enough time to do it. He fought everybody. He fought everybody as an amateur, world-class fighters, best fighters in Britain, you know, the likes of John Murray, etc. He fought everybody domestically that he could have done. He defended every mandatory that was thrown at him. He got offered a fight with Adrian Broner, lucky to get offered that fight, and he took it. Obviously, it fell through because of the Peterson-Khan thing. Sykes then, when everybody was avoiding him in Britain, he went on a run. He went in prize fighter for a second time. And then, can you imagine now, a guy who's lost his British title, then going out and fighting the likes of Johnny Case, unbeaten Kev Hoop and Femi Faintola in warm-up fights? Those were three really good opponents with good records. Sykes went out and fought all those guys in the same year. All these other clowns, all these other pretenders who lose the titles, they're having 6 rounders against journeymen. So Sykes was a throwback fighter. But for me, you're right. You talk about throwback fighters. You talk about Archie Moore. You talk about Ray Robinson. Ray Robinson and Jake LaMotta fought each other twice in a month. And you've got all these absolute clowns who are turning around and saying, you can't fight 4 times a year. Burnout. Marvin Hagler was a throwback fighter. You know, I don't think Sam Jones knows actually what he means by that phrase. And I'd be damned if he knows about the history of boxing and he knows about those guys and Sandy Sadler and Willie Pep and all those guys and Kid Chocolate. I don't think I have a clue about those guys. So don't use a phrase what you don't know what means. That'd be my answer to him. Because if you knew what throwback meant, you wouldn't use that word in terms of Anthony Joshua. But that'd be the last phrase you'd use in terms of Anthony Joshua.
Okay. Does Eddie Hearn trust Joshua to get job done against Usyk? If he does, why are they trying to get step aside? Because they're going for the biggest prize, aren't they? Fury's the money now, and for AJ, and AJ's vulnerable without belts. So does Eddie trust him to get the job done against Usyk? He keeps saying he does and all that. Well, why did they just let the fight happen? Now he's saying, yeah, we wanted the fight along, but they didn't really, did they? Because step aside, but their Fury pulled plug on them at the 11th hour, and Hearn went scrambling to Aram to try and rescue it, but he couldn't do it. So Tyson's played him again, hasn't he?
Tyson's done it. Tyson does him every single time, doesn't he? It's not even difficult for him. Tyson doesn't like Eddie Hearn. He's said that publicly. He's had numerous opportunities to sign with Hearn. Hearn would sign him like a shot, and he would forget about all his other heavyweights in the world if he signed him. And it's one of those things. He's, as I've said before, he's desperate for. I mean, the heavyweight division is the flagship of boxing. You know, they say as heavyweight boxing goes, so does boxing. So he's desperately trying to get any piece of the action he can at heavyweight. Right now, the best way that Eddie Hearn is involved is just by still talking about fights, by still negotiating for fights. Because if these 2 fights happen, and anything can happen, by the way, you know, Dillian White might beat Fury and Joshua might beat Usyk, and that puts Eddie right at the top, and he's laughing. But he knows the laws of probability. Yeah. And the likelihood of those 2 things happening is very, very slim. So he's got to they've really got a decision to make now about the Joshua and Usyk fight, haven't they? I think,
Yeah, they have big Meech and Usyk and White and
yeah, I think White is more. White, I think Dillian White, as I've said before, he's not pushed him. He was happy to let him step out for 2 fights again. I think Dillian White is more disposable for Eddie Hearn. If he gets turned over, well, he's had his shot. You know, I can always bring him back against whoever. He's more disposable.
will he
He's
even
less
pay Eddie if he gets turned over because there's no deal with Macho, has he?
exactly. So you don't know, do you, Matt? So I'll keep the piece of the pie for myself, like Cal Brook did when he fought
Crawford.
Crawford. Yeah, he did exactly the same thing. I think that we all know that the golden goose for Eddie was Anthony Joshua, and deep down, Eddie Hearn, no matter what he says about AJ's legacy and AJ's rematches, and it, deep down, Eddie Hearn knows that Anthony Joshua is not the real deal. He absolutely knows. He can say what he wants publicly, but when you see your fighter in 2 different situations, when you see your fighter under pressure and fold like he did against Ruiz, alarmingly, he folded alarmingly. You know, he wanted out of there. He did not know what to do when he got dropped each time. It was awful to watch. I thought it was quite hard to watch, actually. It was like watching a little novice in in his first bout who didn't know what he was doing when the referee was counting him. It was like, for me, it was really awful to watch. Eddie Hearn saw that, and then he saw him absolutely comprehensively outboxed and outpunched and outfought by Usyk. Eddie Hearn, no matter what he says, knows that Anthony Joshua is not one of the 3 best heavyweights in the world, 4 best heavyweights. He knows that. He knows.
I don't think he's top 8. Me, I don't think he's in top 8.
I don't think so.
This
no.
is my top lot here who I put before him: Fury, Usyk, Ergovic, Yoka. I think they do him. Luis Ortiz. Andy Ruiz has already done him. Fair enough. He was out of shape in Rematch. That's 6. And I'd say he's probably my 8th. I think Huey Fury beats him. I think he's got the style to frustrate him.
I think even if they do or if they don't, the difference now, Russell, I we're talking about is those fights you've just mentioned. All those fights, whether I think Joshua would win some of those or not, they're all 60-40 fights now, aren't they? That's how much his stock has dropped right down. Because the reality is we've seen him, as I've said, massively outboxed, and we've seen him outgunned. We've seen him crumble in front of our eyes twice now, really, really bad. We saw him fight almost scared in the rematch with Ruiz, and Ruiz, you know, he trained at KFC for that fight. We all saw that happen, and that point is Eddie Hearn knows he doesn't have the best heavyweight in the world. He knows he doesn't have nearly the best heavyweight in the world. So for him, unless he's got someone coming through he's going to sign and he can start banging the drum again, Eddie's effectively out of the heavyweight picture, and I think he's terrified of that. So it's like it becomes a game of chess, doesn't it? It's like you're Eddie Hearn and you think, what do I do? I mean, the IFL interview I did watch with him recently, it was the one I watched this week, because I thought I might come on here and get a bit of background. He even mentioned about his own retirement, didn't he? He even said, listen, I'm not going to be around forever myself. And it's almost like he's sickened.
I've been saying it for years. As soon as Joshua's gone, he'll be wasting his time.
Yeah,
because everybody will be laughing at him because he won't be top dog.
Yeah, he's a massively successful guy, clever guy, hardworking guy. Never take those things off him. He understands promotion, but I think what's happened is because his ego is so huge, he thought he could conquer America. He forgets that. He thinks guys like Bob Arum, he thinks they're just dinosaurs, doesn't he? These are smart guys. These are really.
Seen Eddie Hearn's 60 years game, haven't they? Him and Don King. They've seen it all, haven't they?
Nothing. They've put the greatest fights on over the last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. These guys are giants of boxing and they understand the art of negotiation. Bob Arum's a lawyer. He fucking knows it backwards. And Eddie just thought, I think he's underestimated these people. And he got these investment.
Al Heyman's a lawyer, isn't he?
Exactly. These are seriously clever guys. You never heard Bob Arum coming out and saying the deal was done, did you, with Fury and Joshua? Bob Arum never came out and said anything. Frank Warren's a shrewd old bugger. He never came out and said anything. You know, kept saying talks are ongoing, talks are ongoing. It was only Eddie who kept coming out like an excited child because he thought that got the biggest fight in history, according to him. He was like a child. He couldn't hold his own piss, could he? And he kept coming back saying, "Oh, it's done. It's almost done. 24 hours. The ink's going to be dry." And it was like really, really bad. So I think Eddie Hearn, clever guy. My God, clever guy. But it's a little bit like Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn. There are parallels between the two. So Anthony Joshua is not as good a fighter as he thought he was, and that reality is now coming across to him. And Eddie Hearn is not going to be the #1 promoter in boxing like he thought it was going to be. And I think that reality is coming to hit him as well now. So it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like perspective. You and I are humble guys, we're working class guys, so we don't have egos and delusions of grandeur that are ever going to put us into this massive. I talk to you, I hope you don't mind me mentioning it, but you've talked to me about your channel and where you want to take it. Yeah. And your ambitions are quite sensible and grounded and modest. And that's great. But these guys' ambitions are to rule the world, aren't they? They want to rule the world.
Adolf Hitler.
100%, and that's the problem. But pride comes before a fall, and ego comes before a fall, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I think the dawn and the realization has hit them both now. And I don't think you'll see Eddie Hearn in boxing in 5 years, and I definitely don't think you'll see Anthony Joshua in boxing in 5 years, and I don't care what anybody says. Bob Arum will be negotiating a big fight on his deathbed, and then he'll fade away, won't he? But
Joshua against Dave Allen on a car park coming to a city near you on Fight Zone.
Well, you never know, dear. You never know what's going to happen and what people end up doing. But listen. One of the positive that as long as the Dillian White fight happens with Fury, the one positive I've taken from this is I remember saying to you before, Russell, I said, I don't care who fights each other. I just want to see people fight now. I want to see them being like the Larry Holmes.
No fights are happening. Are the Yoka gone?
I just want to see him fight. I just want to see Fury fight. I don't care who Tyson Fury fights. Genuinely don't care. If he scrapes the barrels of the lower top 20 in the world, I want Fury to do what Larry Holmes did when he beat Kenny Norton, and he fought the Lorenzo Zannons and Leroy Joneses and Ozzy Ocasio's and the guys that weren't that great, and he didn't take massive money for it. He didn't want millions for it. I just want Tyson Fury to put an absolute stamp on the heavyweight picture and say, right, you're dealt with, done. Next. And I don't really care. Look, again, I go back to Marvin Hagler. Marvin Hagler won the title in 1980. It took him 3 years before he got a big fight against Roberto Duran. Hagler was just too busy cleaning up the division and battering all his opposition and, taking care of his mandatories. And these guys, they just want to fight for massive money, and that's why we see so few of it. So I just want to see Tyson Fury fight. He's entertaining. He's the best heavyweight in the world. And I personally, Russell, I don't care who he fights. I just want to see him in the ring because I think the best heavyweight in the world should be active.
Yeah, I want to see Huey fight. He doesn't seem to be getting a look in at the moment, does he, Huey?
Well, Huey's one of those, is what do they call it? The Who Needs Him club, so he's already shown himself really early on in his career when he fought, Pulev and he fought Parker. He'd only ever had like really easy fights up until those two fights. So he's shown himself as someone who's got a set of balls, and he's someone who's got that confidence and that belief. And those defeats didn't damage him whatsoever. So because he's proven he'll step up and he'll give anybody a trouble. But what Huey Fury has got, and it's really clear to me to see, he's not a huge puncher. It doesn't matter. He's not a huge heavyweight. But Huey Fury has got that one frightening thing. He's got ring craft.
Yeah.
And that ring craft is because he truly understands the art of fighting. His dad truly understands the art of fighting. So he's got ring craft. So he's, sorry to keep mentioning Gary Sykes, but he's a little bit like the Gary Sykes, because you fight Fury, you fight Huey Fury, you're not banging him out in one round. No. You know you've got a long, hard night against Huey Fury. And whilst he might not be the best heavyweight in the world, he's going to give those guys a real fight who think they are. And that's why...
He's only a baby, isn't he? 27 as well.
He's just a baby, and you can still see almost physically, still not grown into that kind of man frame, and some people do take so long to get to that stage. Heavyweights mature so late, don't they?
And that's Lewis matured late, didn't he?
Exactly. You know, some fighters, obviously, like Mike Tyson, they fly early, but there were a lot of heavyweights seem to mature quite late in their careers. And Huey Fury, my sort of summary of Huey is, I don't think he'll ever be the #1 heavyweight in the world, but I think he's good enough to give the guys who think they are a really good fight. So his phone's probably not going to ring anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's he's hard to match. 2 seconds.
He's a humble guy as well, isn't he?
Hey?
He's a humble guy as well. He doesn't mouth off, does he? He's not massive on social media. He doesn't do massive numbers on social media. And he's probably, Huey Fury might have been better in the 70s or 80s. I'm not saying he would have lived with those guys, but in terms of his ethos and in terms of how he comes across, he would have been a better in that era. So, in fact, what's he called? Sam Jones. Huey Fury is a throwback fighter. When you talk about throwback, use the right people when you're talking about that phrase.
Yeah. Okie dokie then. Well, listen, just a couple of quick questions before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll answer them quickly. Sorry about that.
No problem. Big Meech, does he fight Usyk this year?
No.
Does Dillian White fight Fury in March?
Yes. April. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the McGOWAN verdict then. Okay. All right.
That's where I'm coming from.
We'll get you on next week and we'll do Eubank Williams fight.
Yeah, let's break it down. That's a fun fight. Okay then.
Listen, thanks for coming on, Julian. You've been a star. Hope you're well.
And yourself, mate.
Have a great evening and all the best to you and your family.
Don't let them grind you down, mate. Okay.
All right. You take care. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye. Well, that were Julian. It was nice to have him on. Rocky, watch me foot. I've got no slippers on. I think that's about it. It was nice to have him on. It's a nice guy, Julian. He's keeps it open. Come here. Come here. You want to go over? We're going to walk in a bit. Yeah. What's the matter with you? You want to be on TV? You want to be on TV? Come on then. Where's them cats? Get them cats. Oh, look at his head spinning now. Come here. Come on. Nice to have Julian on. I like talking to Julian. He talks a lot of sense. We could talk all day. I'm saving myself for my comeback on Tuesday. We're going to film helmets on Monday. I'm going to film helmets at where they pack Coca-Cola on Monday. I'm going to go there. I'm going to do helmets there, then I'll get it all jazzed up over the next couple of days. So helmets, I'll be doing votes tomorrow, get them all counted in. So get your votes in for helmets of the month for January 2022. I'm going to film it on the 31st and it'll be out probably the 1st or the 2nd. We're back in office on Tuesday. That's about it, really. Not really much else to talk about. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a long one. I'm going to have a shake now and some soup later. And that's about it, really. I'm going to watch a film called Public Enemy with Johnny Depp and Marion Cotillard. Have you seen it? Stephen Graham's in it. I'm going to watch that. About John Dillinger. So that's about it. We're just going to chill out, aren't we, today, Rock? Chill out, man. All right. So everybody have a great evening or great weekend, what's left of it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I did a little 20-minute video before this, so you'll get that as a teaser. I've got a little live chat on it as well now. So I'll be doing this, for the next couple of hours, and I'll be doing live chat. We'll probably get a film on about 8 to eat, Rocker. Rocky likes a good old film, don't you? We're Mint Penguin. All right. So thanks for liking and subscribing and sharing the video amongst all your pals on WhatsApp. And don't have nightmares. Peace out.